Good afternoon. This is McCabe Hurley from MH Derivative Solutions with a story in 3 parts on the Libor crisis. This is part 1. What is Libor? Drive-by knowledge are short videos answering either market-related questions or questions that you bring to us. We try to bring you just the facts, and we hope you enjoy them. What is Libor? Libor stands for the London Interbank Offered Rate. It's an unsecured interbank rate at which banks borrow from and lend to each other. Libor trades out to 5 years, but it is most active out to 3 years. We also use Libor as a benchmark rate from which other rates are compared. So you may hear somebody speaking on a desk that might say, oh, XYZ Corporation can borrow for 5 years at 5-year swaps plus 100 basis points. That 100 basis points is the Libor spread. In order to explain the Libor crisis to you, I need to tell you a tale of 2 Libors. So we have a reset rate that is set and remains unchanged for the entire day. And then we also have a deposit rate, which trades and changes all day long. Okay? Here you see the Libor rate is reset at 2.55% at 5 a.m. And it's a snapshot rate. Again, they go around to the 26 banks, they reset it, it fixes the rate for the day, and it's used to reset not only the floating leg of all swaps resetting that day, but also all floating rate loans, mortgages that may be resetting that day. In other words, you get a rate every 6 months and you pay that same rate every month on a personal mortgage. Then we have the deposit rate. The deposit rate is an interbank rate as well, same credit quality, but it's a tradable rate. It trades all day and it changes all day. The reset rate is set by the British Bankers Association. They no longer do so for US dollar Libor, but I wanted to keep this in situ for the 2008-2009 crisis, so I've kept it in here for those purposes. Okay, we'll talk about what is actually happening now in part 3. The BBA at that time was resetting unsecured borrowing rates for 10 currencies and 15 maturities, and also fixing prices for certain precious metals. They reset their rate at 11 a.m. London time, which is 5 a.m. New York time. They call a panel of 26 banks and compile the results. They throw out the high and low and average the balance. Even though the BBA is announcing it, it's the panel banks that are responsible for reporting that short-term borrowing rate, or that Libor rate, to the BBA. So, for example, it's 11 a.m. London time. The British Bankers Association begins to make their phone calls, and they ask a very specific question. Where have you been able to fund your bank this morning? They're not asking them for a market. They're asking them for transaction. They're asking them, where have you been able to borrow money to fund your bank this morning? So let's just look at an easy 6-bank panel. We have the first gentleman is able to fund himself at 2.5%. Our second gentleman here is able to fund himself at 2.6%. We have a third gentleman that was able to fund himself at 2.1%. A fourth bank with a lady that's able to fund herself at 3.1%. The fifth borrower is able to borrow US dollars at 2.2%. And finally, the last borrower is able to fund themselves at 2.9%. Again, using the British Bankers Association standard, they throw out the high and low, they average the rest. The average of the four remaining rates is 2.55%. So, using our 6-bank panel, 3-month LIBOR reset rate for that day would be 2.55%. So, why would a panel bank give a lower rate to the BBA? Well, if I submit a higher rate, and it's a significantly higher rate than the other banks are giving, well, then the other banks could sense weakness in my bank because I had to pay such a high rate to fund myself this morning, and that could cause a run on their bank. So now you understand how LIBOR rates are reset, the difference between reset rates and deposit rates, why a bank would provide a lower rate to the BBA than otherwise trading in the market. So now you have the basics. Let's go to part 2 and take a look at Libor crisis, the impact. Well, that's all for me, folks. This time, until next time, this is your intrepid reporter wearing her seatbelt and going the speed limit to bring you more drive-by knowledge.